Hello, thank you for joining me for another story of hope. My guest is a return guest today. Richard Grizzell appeared previously, and we talked about an accident that you had, Richard, and how that had affected your spiritual life and was one of the more challenging moments in your walk with Christ.
Yes.
However, you and your wife faced something, to my mind, that was even more challenging. So, tell me a little bit about your family as we begin to talk about this portion of your life.
Okay. Married when I was 20. We had 2 children before my accident, and Rachel and Talitha. 79, 81, and then in 85, Sarah was born. And we were a small family. I was just finishing up college after my accident. I went back to school and graduated with of all things, a degree in aviation, which I think is kind of funny because I can just see. Let's now say, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking off as soon as we load the pilot's wheelchair. But so we lived up in the foothills of the Blue Mountains on several acres, and had a creek, and it was a very pleasant time. And
almost an idyllic life.
Yes, it really was. And we homeschooled our girls, and when our oldest was 12, Rachel, she was baptized in the creek, and when she came up, she had a cardiac arrest, and that was the first of many, and we didn't know at the time that that's what was happening. There was paramedic and 2 nurses that revived her at that point, and we had several instances of that. She was at 4-H at the fair. There were just a number of them, and eventually we came to the point that said, if she has another one, we're out of here. We're taking her to Seattle. Well, she was at a piano recital. Sat down, started to play the piano, and as all parents do, we had a little video camera, and so we actually got her cardiac arrest on camera and rushed her to the hospital. She was actually down for 15 minutes. In other words, having CPR. The first folks there just had oxygen. They were able to revive her at Walla Walla General, and life flighted her to Seattle. And she was in a coma for 4 days. And when she did come out of it, had a little teddy bear on the foot of her bed. And I'd say, Rachel, who gave you the little teddy bear? And she said, I don't know. And she was, like I said, about 12 at the time. And so I would pick that up, and I'd say, oh, this is from Grandma. 10 seconds later, I could ask her, Rachel, who gave you the little teddy bear? She said, I don't know. And so being down without a heart beating for that long and oxygen, pretty well would be looking at somebody that would be very brain damaged.
Yes.
But God blessed us so much that eventually she got all that back. And she wasn't as, what I would say, crisp and quick and sharp as she had been. But she went on to become a ICU and pediatric ICU nurse at Children's Hospital, and went on to get his master's degree, and she's now a school nurse in Duval. So God blessed us through that, but during that she had to have an implanted defibrillator, and The defibrillators at that time were about this big around, and maybe an inch thick and 4 inches long, 3 inches wide. So they put that in the muscles of her belly, and she had leads into her heart. So when she would have a cardiac arrest, it would shock her heart and put it back into the correct rhythm. And through the years, she's had several.
Of course, Rachel was
those.
not your only daughter.
Rachel was not our oldest daughter.
Your only daughter.
The only daughter,
Yeah.
yes. We wanted to have all of our girls, because it's genetic.
Yes.
We wanted to have all of our girls to have that, because we didn't know, because the genetic testing at the time was not at a place that they could tell us. They thought she had a certain arrhythmia called long QT, but that's not what she had. It's another great big long word. And so the focus was on Rachel, but we were really monitoring Talitha and Sarah. They wore what's called a Holter monitor for quite some time to see if they had it, but it never showed. And
So you thought they were clear?
so we thought they were clear, but we still worried. The protocol, in order for them to have it at the time, because this was pretty new technology, was one of them had to have a cardiac arrest and live through it, or one of them had to die. And those were not great options for us. And so we had about 20 acres that we raised wheat on. And so it got to a point, because Talitha had twice passed out, running in the barn one time, and we asked her, so did you trip and fall and then pass out, or did you pass out first? And she said, I don't know. And that happened a couple of times, and so we said, we're going to get a defibrillator. They were about $4,000 at the time, big clunky, and we had been going to St. Mary's, Idaho for vacation for years, and every summer with Glenn and Wendy Maxted and the kids. And so we had gone up, we were on vacation, we were at the river, and the girls and all the kids would run off the dock and jump in when a boat would go by, so where they could splash in the wave. And a boat went by, and so they jumped into the water, and Sarah, our youngest at that time, was 12. Talitha would have been, well, she was 16 and a half at that time. And Sarah started to crawl up the ladder when Talitha came up behind her and said, hurry up, get out of the way, I need to get out. And Sarah turned around, and Talitha was sinking in the water. And she reached down and grabbed her by her hair and pulled her up, and started screaming. And I think it was Glenn grabbed her and pulled her up, and I was actually driving the boat that had gone by. And Pastor Dave Thomas was there. He was going to do a baptism the next day for Lance Maxted, and David, and I can't remember David's last name now. Anyways, Glenn and Wendy started doing CPR, and they called 911 from St. Mary's. There was road construction, so it took them about 15 minutes to get there. They hooked her up to the defibrillator and shocked her, and they couldn't get a rhythm, so they continued to do CPR. Got her in the ambulance. They stopped once, shocked her, and couldn't get it going. And Marilyn and I, with Rachel, had made a plan that I would always stay with the girls, and she would always go with whoever was injured, because I was in the wheelchair. And so she had gone in. They got to St. Mary's, and she was standing at the emergency room, and they had shocked her a couple of times, and the doctor shook his head to the nurse, and then he looked up, and he saw Mary Lynn. And so he shocked her one more time. and got a rhythm. And so then they life flighted her to Spokane, and it was on August 1st, and she was proclaimed brain dead. And during this time, it was the most painful experience that I've ever gone through, worse than my accident. And yet, through those few days, because my little Sarah is 12, and she's been an advocate her whole life, and that's what she does for work today. And she got up in our face and said, Talitha wanted to donate her organs. And we told her always what to do her whole life. And you need to let her do this. And so we did. She was a donor of her corneas, liver, kidneys, not her heart, because that's an electrical problem. And I can remember she was supposed to go in that night into ER, where they take her in and do the procedure to extract the organs. And that morning, the chaplain prayed a beautiful prayer. It was over the intercom. And I saw him about an hour later. And I said, that was such a beautiful prayer, and I just wanted to thank him for that. And he said, I actually wrote that prayer for you and your wife. Mm. And it was kind of, it is unprecedented. What I did, I had read some stories about how donors were treated. And so I was really resistive at that, and I told him, when you do that surgery, you will treat her with respect, and you will stitch her up, and you will bandage her up as if she is going to come back to the room alive. And if you mistreat her, well, I won't tell you what I told them. Just that there would be trouble. And I requested that they bring Talitha back to her room to where I could say goodbye. I mean, there were so many friends that were there, and Pastor Thomas and his wife, and Gordon Pfeiffer, GP, was there. He came and visited, and actually there was a busload of students coming back for something, and they wanted to come in, and we told them, no, we don't want you to remember Talitha that way. And so...
Richard, there are lots of people who have lost loved ones in the last few months. What hope do you have as a believer in Christ that you can share with them?
Oh, you need to hear Mary Lynn's story on this. Just really quick, it was a 1-year anniversary. She was on the dock, just down from where Talitha had died. And she was struggling with God and praying, how do I know that Talitha is going to be resurrected? And she said, crawl between the boards on this dock was the ugliest bug thing, whereas most people would squash it. My wife's not that way. She is just intrigued. This thing crawls up, and it is ugly and slimy, and she's just watching it. And then its back begins to split open. And she's wondering, what in the world? And then as it splits open, these little wings come out. And it's one of those little tiny blue dragonflies. And it lays there, and it's flapping its wings a little bit, and it's just laying in the sunshine, drying out to where it could fly. And it flew over, landed on her hand. And God has an amazing way of giving us the answer. And that was his answer to Mary Lynn, that's saying, there is a resurrection, and life might be ugly right now, but one day, all of this is going to be finished.
And we're going to rise again.
And we are going to rise again, and we're going to meet our Lord in the air. And I have total confidence that Talitha will rise again, and that we will see her. The interesting thing about the name Talitha, it actually comes out of Mark 6, the story when Jesus raises the little girl. Now, we pronounce it Talitha. I don't know how it is in Hebrew. But it is rise, arise, little girl. And that's her name. And she will rise again. And all those that have lost loved ones, they will rise.
You may have lost a loved one, or you may be afraid of losing a loved one. But in Jesus Christ, we have an eternal hope. Hope that gives us faith for tomorrow. Thank you for joining me in this story of hope.